Luke Skywalker meditated deeply on Ahch-To, isolated in his search for the deepest mysteries of the Force. After years of training and reflection, he had learned to manipulate projection with a mastery never before seen among the Jedi. His intention was to use the Force to traverse not only space but also time. He believed that if he could return to the past and intervene at decisive moments, he could alter Anakin Skywalker's fate and prevent his fall to the dark side. The idea of saving his father even before his complete corruption motivated him more than anything else. The stillness of the night was interrupted by a familiar presence. The ghost of Yoda, glowing in bluish tones, materialized before him. The former Jedi Master watched him with a worried look, as if he already knew Luke's thoughts. Luke explained his intention, revealing that he had discovered the ability to project his consciousness into past times. He believed that the Force could allow him to do this, as he had already felt echoes of the past during his meditations. Yoda, however, warned him about the risks of interfering with the flow of time. The Jedi Master explained that changing the past could have unpredictable consequences, possibly even worse than the original events. Despite his master's warnings, Luke insisted on his plan and questioned what had been the first step that had led Anakin into darkness. Yoda, being on the other side of the Force, knew all about Anakin's history, so he hesitated for a moment, as if pondering whether to reveal such a truth. Then he finally answered that it all began in the desert of Tatooine, when Anakin, overcome with rage, wiped out an entire camp of Tuskens. He not only killed the warriors but also women and children, giving himself over completely to rage. For Master Yoda, that had been Anakin's first great sin and the moment when the shadow began to corrupt his heart. Luke felt a chill when he heard these words and realized that this was the point at which he had to act. With renewed determination, Luke asked his master how he could reach that moment in time. Yoda explained that the projection had to be perfected in an exceptional way, because sending his consciousness into the past required a level of connection with the Force that had never been achieved before. He would need to strengthen his mind against the echoes of time and protect himself against the dark forces that inhabited the past. Training began immediately, and Luke dedicated himself to perfecting his technique day and night. At first, he could only glimpse disconnected fragments of the past, as if he were observing memories scattered on the surface of a lake. Each attempt required absolute mental control, and any distraction caused his consciousness to be lost. Weeks passed, and Luke faced countless difficulties. On many occasions, he was pulled back to the present before reaching his goal. On others, he found himself lost in a timeless void, where echoes of the past and future mixed chaotically. Yoda patiently guided him, warning him about the need to control his emotions. He explained that the Force should not be used as a tool to manipulate fate, but as a means of understanding the balance of the universe. Despite the warnings, Luke persisted in his training, convinced that he could change history without destroying the natural order of events. One silent night, under the glow of the moon in Ahch-To, Luke finally reached the necessary state. His mind broke through the barriers of time, transporting his consciousness to a distant point in the past. Luke's projection felt his ethereal body being pulled back to the Tusken camp, as if he were passing through an invisible whirlpool in the stream of time. When he opened his eyes, he found himself once again surrounded by the fur tents and wooden poles supporting flags worn by the wind and sand. Night was advancing, and only the light of the campfires illuminated the rustic village. He looked at his own hands, still translucent, and moved his fingers in the air. He tried to touch one of the spears stuck in the ground, but his hand passed through the object as if it didn't exist. The test confirmed that he was intangible and therefore unable to physically interact with that world. Despite his physical limitations, Luke felt that his connection with the Force remained intact. He closed his eyes and concentrated, trying to channel the energy around him. The wind around him intensified slightly, as if responding to his call. Then, with a slight mental nod, he lifted a small handful of sand from the ground, causing it to swirl in the air in gentle spirals. This realization surprised him and filled him with hope. Even though he was a projection, he could still manipulate the Force, which meant he had a chance of influencing that night's events. Moving through the camp, Luke studied the surrounding Tuskens. Armed men stood guard on the edge of the village, while the women and children remained huddled inside their tents. He knew that, in a few moments, Anakin Skywalker would arrive there filled with hatred and, with a single blow, seal his fate as Darth Vader. The cold desert wind blew, bringing with it a gloomy feeling. Time was running out and Luke had to act at the right moment to prevent the tragedy that was about to happen. The darkness of the night was broken by the sound of hurried, heavy footsteps. Luke turned in time to see a hooded figure sneaking between the rocks, moving towards the center of the camp. The gleam of a dormant lightsaber reflected off the scabbard of his belt. Luke immediately recognized the young Anakin Skywalker, his own father. Overcome with despair and fury, he advanced unnoticed by the Tuskens, moving with the precision of a predator. Luke's heart squeezed as he saw him disappear into one of the tents where his mother, Shmi Skywalker, was being held captive. Luke slowly approached the entrance to the tent and observed the scene unfolding before him. Anakin knelt beside his mother, holding her frail hands and caressing her wounded face. The woman's face lit up with a faint smile at the sight of her son. She tried to say something, but her voice was only a hoarse whisper. Luke knew the story. He knew that Shmi Skywalker would use her last strength to say how proud she was of Anakin, before expiring in his arms. When that happened, he saw the young Jedi's expression change. His eyes, once full of tenderness, were filled with fury and grief. Anakin remained motionless for a few seconds, holding his mother's lifeless body. Then something inside him broke. Slowly, he set Shmi down on the ground and stood up, his fists clenched and his shoulders shaking with hatred. The air around him seemed to vibrate with his fury, and Luke realized it was the same dark energy he had felt when he had faced Darth Vader in the past. Anakin came out of the tent with heavy steps, his face like a mask of contained rage. He looked out over the camp, observing the Tuskens going about their daily lives without even suspecting what was to come. When Anakin reached for his lightsaber to start the massacre, Luke decided to act. He concentrated on the Force and created a slight disturbance around Anakin, a small tremor that caught his attention. The young Jedi turned quickly and his eyes widened at the sight of Luke standing a few meters away from him. The wind rustled their robes and tension settled in the air. Anakin frowned and narrowed his eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing. The stranger in front of him was wearing Jedi robes, but his appearance seemed to be a reflection distorted by the light. Luke remained silent for a few seconds, assessing the image his father had once had, before all the evil done to him and before he himself caused the worst evil in the galaxy. He saw the same boy Obi-Wan had trained, but now consumed by rage and grief. Anakin stepped forward, keeping his hand on the hilt of his saber. He wondered who the stranger was and what he was doing there. Luke knew he couldn't reveal his identity, as it might cause more confusion than clarification. Instead, Luke said that he was just some Jedi, someone who had seen many destinies destroyed because of anger and who wouldn't want to see it happen again. Anakin's expression hardened, and he gritted his teeth. He wondered if Luke had seen what the Tuskens had done to his mother and expected him to just let it go. The anger in his voice was enlightening, and Luke realized that convincing his father would be more difficult than he had imagined. He took a deep breath and tried to convey calm through the Force. He told Anakin that his pain was real, but that revenge wouldn't bring his mother back. It would only distance him from who he really was. Anakin scoffed at Luke's words, saying that no Jedi could understand his pain. Time seemed to stand still between them, as if the Force itself was waiting for the outcome of that moment. Luke realized that he had to choose his words carefully. If he got it wrong, Anakin would surrender to the darkness as he should have. If he got it right, there might be a chance to change the fate of the galaxy. The young Skywalker knew that the decisive moment was upon him, and his mission had only just begun. Luke's words and intentions were not enough. Anakin didn't flinch at the presence of the projection. His face contorted into an expression of pure fury, and without even looking back, he strode forward towards the first Tusken he spotted. His blue lightsaber ignited with a snap, illuminating the night with an intense glow. The first blow was accurate, and one of the warriors fell without even having time to react. The second tried to raise a rudimentary weapon, but Anakin was faster, moving with deadly precision. Within seconds, another body tumbled to the sand, while the sounds of the camp began to change, from a sleepy silence to absolute chaos. Luke moved behind him, his ethereal body floating with a lightness that contrasted with the brutality of the moment. He knew he had to stop it before Anakin's fury completely consumed his soul. With a firm voice, he called out his father's name, ordering him to stop. Anakin, still filled with hatred, hesitated for a brief moment. That moment of distraction was enough for one of the Tusken warriors to realize the situation and act. Without Anakin seeing, one of the natives grabbed a spear and, with a war cry, threw the weapon at the Jedi with all his might. Before the blade could pierce its target, an invisible energy appeared. The spear stopped abruptly a few centimeters from Anakin's face, suspended in the air as if frozen in time. The young Jedi opened his eyes wide, confused by what was happening. He turned slowly and saw Luke with his hand outstretched, his gaze intense and focused. Luke's projection, even without a physical body, had used the Force to stop the fatal blow. Anakin looked at the spear hovering in front of him, feeling the power that held it still. For the first time that night, his anger gave way to a spark of surprise and doubt. Taking advantage of the moment of hesitation, Luke focused on the Force again and, with a precise gesture, projected a wave of energy around the camp. Several Tusken were thrown back like leaves in the wind, rolling across the sand before they could get up. Realizing that they were facing something beyond their comprehension, many of them began to flee. Panic spread among the tents, and the survivors began to run into the shadows of the desert. The savagery of the massacre had been unexpectedly interrupted, leaving only Anakin and Luke standing among the flames of the fires. Anakin clenched his fists and looked at the escaping Tusken, his frustration evident in every tense muscle of his body. He couldn't understand how that stranger had managed to stop his attack. More than that, he felt he was being challenged in a way he had never experienced before. His eyes met Luke's, and for the first time he really looked at him, not as a passing obstacle, but as someone who seemed determined to stop him going down that road. The silence between the two lasted only a few seconds, but it carried the weight of something much greater than any battle. Still shaking with rage, Anakin demanded to know who Luke was and why he was interfering. His voice was charged with emotion, a mixture of fury and despair. Luke, keeping his expression calm, said that he was there to prevent Anakin from making an irreversible mistake. He explained that he understood his pain, but that allowing his anger to control him would only take him further away from everything that really mattered. Luke's words sounded like a distant echo, a reflection of what Yoda and Obi-Wan had tried to teach Anakin in the past, but which he had never wanted to hear. Anakin scoffed at the idea of emotional control, saying that the Jedi talked about peace, but didn't understand what it meant to lose someone so cruelly. Luke nodded slowly, recognizing the depth of his father's pain. He didn't try to deny Anakin's suffering, as he knew it would only strengthen his resistance. Instead, he said that true power lay not in destruction, but in choosing how to respond to suffering. He explained that anger was a poison, a trap that consumed even those who believed they were in control. The young Skywalker remained silent for a moment, Luke's words echoing in his mind. He could still feel the hatred burning in his chest, but something inside him was beginning to waver. Part of him wanted to ignore that conversation and finish what he had started, but another part was beginning to wonder if that stranger wasn't right. Luke sensed Anakin's doubt and knew he had a chance. He had to keep going. He had to find a way to reach his father before it was too late. It was as if the galaxy itself was waiting for the outcome of that conversation. Luke knew that this was a crucial moment. The decision Anakin made there could change everything. Inspired by Yoda's teachings, he decided to proceed, guiding his words as carefully as he would a lightsaber in a duel. The journey to stop the rise of Darth Vader was still far from over, but for the first time, Luke felt that there was hope. Luke felt the weight of the words he needed to say. Anakin was still seething with rage, but now there was hesitation in his eyes. He couldn't miss this moment. With a calm but firm voice, He revealed that he knew the future. He said that he had seen Anakin die and that his fate was sealed by the choices he would make that night. Anakin frowned, feeling the impact of those words. Who was that man, and how could he know something like that? There was a strange familiarity in his presence, something Anakin couldn't understand. Without revealing his true identity, Luke continued. He explained that Obi-Wan Kenobi was a friend and that he had also been his master. Anakin clenched his fists when he heard the name of his mentor, who was currently investigating the attempts on Padmé's life. The anger and resentment were still there, but something in Luke's tone made him pay attention. He wanted to know more. Luke asked Anakin not to mention that conversation to anyone. He said that the Force had brought him there for a reason, because Anakin was the chosen one and was being given a second chance. Anakin took a deep breath. That was something Qui-Gon Jinn had said years before. Now this mysterious Jedi was saying the same thing. The storm of emotions inside Anakin was beginning to calm down. His chest still burned from the loss of his mother, but now there was another feeling emerging. Connection. Somehow he felt he knew that man. He couldn't say how or why, but Luke seemed to understand his pain in a way that no one else ever had. The stranger didn't condemn him as the Jedi were wont to do. Instead, he spoke with empathy, as if he really understood what he was going through. Anakin looked away, confused by it all. Luke knew he couldn't force Anakin to change. The decision had to come from him. With one last firm look, he said that the Force always offered paths, but that it was up to the individual to choose which one to take. Anakin had to decide right then and there whether he wanted to become a slave to his own anger or someone capable of protecting those he loved without having to resort to hatred. These words struck Anakin deeply. For the first time that night, he lowered his lightsaber. His eyes roamed over the abandoned camp. The blood of those two Tuskens still stained the sand, and the pain still throbbed in his heart. But Luke was right. He had to decide. The silence between them was interrupted by a warm desert breeze. Luke felt the Force move around him, indicating that his time there was running out. He looked at Anakin once more, absorbing every detail of that moment. Perhaps he would never have a chance like this again. With a subtle nod, he turned away and began to disappear, his body becoming one with the Force until it was completely gone. Anakin stood still, staring into the void where that mysterious Jedi had been seconds before. He felt a tightness in his chest, as if he had just lost something important. Not knowing what to think, Anakin mounted his speeder and set off to find Padmé, who was in that residence where Shmi lived with another man and Anakin's half-brother. The wind cut across his face as he made his way through the desert. His mind was a jumble of thoughts. He still felt the pain of loss, but something inside him had changed. The memory of Luke's words echoed in his mind like a constant whisper. He couldn't explain it, but he had the feeling that that conversation had a much greater purpose than he could understand. When he arrived, Anakin entered quietly, taking care not to wake anyone. He walked to Padmé's room and stopped at the door. The moonlight illuminated her face as she slept peacefully. For a moment, Anakin just stood there watching her. The sight of her brought unexpected relief, as if Padmé's mere presence would help calm his soul. Drawing closer, he felt a wave of gratitude for the Force. If Luke was right, he still had a choice. There was still a different path to follow. Before he left, Anakin felt another presence. He looked away and, for a moment, he thought he saw his mother there, smiling at him. His heart squeezed, but instead of pain, he felt a comforting warmth. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, allowing himself to accept the moment. It was as if the Force was giving him a chance to say goodbye, to find peace before moving on. When he opened his eyes again, the image was gone, but the feeling of comfort remained. After making an honorable farewell and bury Shmi's body alongside Padmé, her half-brother and the man who married her, Anakin was feeling different from any other time. The hatred was still there, but it was no longer dominant. In its place, there was a spark of something new, a possibility that hadn't existed before. He could still hear Luke's words echoing inside him as he prepared to leave Padmé's side. For the first time since his mother's death, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he had the power to choose a different future. Luke's consciousness returned to the present as if he had gone through a maelstrom of pure energy, but this time not as hard as the first. His breathing was labored, his body covered in sweat, and his mind pulsed as if it were being flooded with a torrent of information. When he looked at his body, he noticed that his beard had grown twice as long since he left. He noticed that his fingernails were the size of claws. He felt that something had changed, that the reality around him was no longer the same. He closed his eyes and glimpses of the new future flashed before his mind, showing a fate completely different from the one he knew. His interference in the past had altered the course of history in unimaginable ways. He saw scenes of Anakin still at the side of the Jedi Order, never corrupted by the deceptive promise of absolute power. He saw the Jedi Council united, without the shadow of mistrust that had grown between them in the last days of the Old Republic. He saw the galaxy taking a different course, without the rise of the Empire, without the destruction of the Jedi, and without the dominance of fear. In the midst of this avalanche of memories, a familiar voice appeared, calm and wise as ever. The ghost of Yoda appeared before him, his eyes shining with knowledge and approval. The little Jedi Master watched Luke carefully before he began to speak. He explained that by stopping Anakin's fury against the Tusken, Luke had blazed a new trail in the destiny of the galaxy. Yoda told how, shortly after the conversation he had with Anakin in the past, Anakin himself received a message from Obi-Wan. He then discovered that he had been captured by the Separatists and taken to Geonosis, where he was to be executed. In the original timeline, this event led Anakin to rescue him alongside Padme, but their failure put them at the mercy of Count Dooku. This time, however, things unfolded differently. With his connection to the Force more balanced, Anakin managed to rescue Obi-Wan without any fatal errors. At the crucial moment of the battle, Yoda arrived in time to help them, preventing Obi-Wan from being crushed by Dooku's attacks. The duel began with Dooku striking first, using his elegant swordplay to keep Anakin and Obi-Wan at bay. The Count tried to separate them, throwing calculated blows to destabilize his opponents. Obi-Wan defended masterfully, while Anakin advanced aggressively, pressuring the Sith. Dooku, experienced, used the Force to throw debris and create gaps in his defense. When the combat intensified, Yoda intervened, spinning his saber with impeccable precision. He deflected Dooku's attacks and prevented him from using the Force to dominate the battle. The synergy between the three Jedi began to weigh against the Sith. Anakin, without the weakness of losing an arm, fought with controlled fury, attacking with full force. Dooku realized that he was being outmatched. He tried to knock Obi-Wan down with a Force push, but Yoda shielded him. Anakin took advantage of the distraction and launched a swift blow, severing both of Dooku's arms. Disarmed and with no escape, the Sith fell to his knees. Instead of killing him, Anakin followed the Jedi Code and arrested him. Palpatine lost his pawn before he could corrupt him, changing the fate of the galaxy forever. Dooku's capture exposed Darth Sidious's plans before he could manipulate Anakin. With the secret revealed, the Jedi prepared to confront the true Sith Lord before he had a chance to destroy the Order. Palpatine tried to use his political influence to escape, but without the prolonged war and the execution of Order 66, his power began to crumble. The Jedi, led by Mace Windu and Yoda, confronted the Chancellor in an epic duel in the Galactic Senate itself. This time, Anakin didn't arrive in time to stop Windu, nor was he manipulated by the fear of losing. The Sith Chancellor, without allies, was defeated in combat by the swift and powerful attacks of Windu's purple saber, and so he was imprisoned before he could establish his dictatorship. The Republic never fell, and the balance of the Force was restored without the suffering that originally drove Anakin into darkness. Without the rise of the Empire, the little Jedi apprentices were never massacred, and hope never ceased to shine over the galaxy. Luke listened intently to every word from Yoda's ghost, feeling the weight of his mission. He realized that he should never have existed as he knew him, because his existence was tied to the collapse of the Jedi Order and the rise of the rebellion. Yet there he was, somehow maintaining his identity in the midst of the new timeline. Yoda explained that, because he was the one who made the change, his mind retained the memories of the old reality, but for everyone else, the future had always been like this. You made the change, yes, but only you, the old past belongs to you. For the others, this is how the future has always been. The Jedi looked at the horizon, feeling the pulse of the Force in every fiber of his being. He had done the impossible, changed history, and saved countless lives. However, he knew that the balance of the Force was fragile, and new challenges would always arise. The galaxy might be safe for now, but the dark side would never completely disappear. Still, he felt peace, for he had done his duty to the best of his ability.